Hi everyone, my name is John Myer, also known as the AWS blogger. Now I'm rounding in the second episode or part of why I left AWS. And a quick recap to everybody is, we started out in the beginning on, working at a local electric company all the way up to how I, met Andy Jassy or played blackjack accidentally with Andy Jassy for reInvent 2018 and utilizing one of the services AWS landings. Now, keep in mind, this whole premise and why I'm creating this podcast is not to talk bad about AWS. It's a really great company to work for if you get the right manager or the right skip. Now, a skip is your manager's manager. You're supposed to be able to skip your manager and talk to them. And it's all around the right people to work with. Keep in mind also that things change and, the organization changes and you have to make sure that you're in the right place or you're working for the right people that will also help. When AWS says you own your career, you own the data for your career, but ultimately your manager and skip own your career or roles that you're going to be changing into because everybody reaches out to them. And you don't know what they're going to be saying. That was somewhat of my case. But let's get back on the topic here. I ended the last one with playing blackjack with Andy Jassy and how awesome his customer session was. I wrote a couple articles about it. People were really cool. And I was working for a huge MSP, while they were huge at the time, in San Jose. And it was a great company. They allowed me to basically invent and kind of try to figure out what our best AWS services were. The last few months of my role at this MSP started to change. I had brought on a colleague of mine and we started offering well-architected reviews and we flew out to Seattle and we were driving things. I mean, my leadership was really excited. Going into our sales kickoff, which is also called like an SKO by AWS, but most companies call it the same thing. Or your all hands meeting. Everybody in the company comes there. We fly out to California. It's pretty cool. And right around that time, I was working on going to a distributor in London, and we were planning a trip. It was going to be my first trip overseas. I was taking a colleague of mine who I worked with at the electric company. The best worker I know, you can kind of just give them some of those things and tell them to off and run it. Well, while we were there, they were setting up a meeting with AWS in May. So we were going to go to London. We were going to present this stuff and have them start offering like well-architected reviews for customers and really finding the way in and niche and start to architect and redesign this. And then afterwards, in May, we were meeting with our PDM, which is our partner development manager, and their boss in Seattle. All right, so let's go to this trip because the London thing was awesome, by the way, the first trip out there, but also being able to represent my company and the next thing or our go-to-market strategy was really important to me. All right, so I flew out to Seattle with my boss. Now, keep in mind, I also got a new boss. So this is really interesting, and it kind of like a theme is when you start working with a boss, you have to realize how your new bosses work, and your bosses have to realize you. But I'm also calling them a boss because I will talk about what a leader is here shortly. And what a leader does for you, and those that, a leadership is really all about the people and not about themselves. And they surround themselves with the best people to create the best team. All right, back to, the current thing that I was talking about. We flew out to Seattle. I had my boss, I had my CTO. My CTO came from Microsoft. So he's heavily ingrained into Azure. No big deal, but I think a CTO should have an open mind, with a multi-cloud premise in an MSP. And the reason that he was heavily ingrained into Azure is, Microsoft gave him lots of money to kind of invest and do, certain things. But they were also, it was a two-way street. Both were invested in each other. Well, we're in this meeting, and, I'm talking. My boss at the time is talking about some of the things, and I'm just kind of listening then, and they're kind of asking the CTO about, certain things. And I remember this CTO, it's actually really funny. He's talking about like um, Azure AWS. He goes, well, and he wanted to say AWS, but he's like, with Azure AWS. And he was always talking about like S3 and optimizing, and he only knew the beginning of the premise. Like he was only concerned about the top level stuff, so he only had enough information to talk high level, and I guess that's why I was there to help things out. Then a PDM who I loved working with. This person was really helpful. Knew that I was trying my hardest. We were so close to the end user compute competency. And it was just like we were, my colleague and I, we were going to be taking this company to the next level. Getting some offering. It was going to show AWS that this MSP was fully invested. Excuse me. And so I'm in the middle of talking, and my boss interrupts me. Wait, John, I got to cut you off. And I can look across the table at my PDM and their boss, and they were in complete shock. They were like taken back. And in fact, I think it took a moment for them to actually gather themselves and realize, like, oh my God, his boss just completely cut him off and, disrespected him. At that point, I didn't learn this till later. At that point, they kind of decided, why? Why would, if somebody's going to treat their employee like this, how are we supposed to work with them? Now, AWS and its partners, it's a two-way street. Everybody works together. You show you're invested into them and they show you're invested in it. It's not a scientific, like some, secret that AWS only helps you when it's a certain dollar amount. No, you have to show you're invested. And when I say invested is that you are, investing in the resources. Certifications. You're investing in an alliance lead. You have your dedication to that. It's not just a general, like multi-cloud type thing. Is that you offer in specific ones, but at the same time, it's a partnership. That's exactly what it is, and that's what the AWS is good at. And you see some of the top partners do really well. All right, going back to this meeting, and I apologize, I keep digressing on just a little bit. Going back to this meeting, we walk out of there, and I was a little taken back by my boss and my CTO because I had a lot of respect for my PDM and her boss at the time, and I still do because they're good friends of mine. We were coming out of there, and we were walking down to the down to the port, and my CTO and my boss go, they're not going to invest in, they're not, but. And I was like, well, you have to realize that you have to invest at the same time they do. They're not just going to hand you leads. That's not how things work in any company. They just don't go, here you go, here's money, money. That was the turning point for me. That's when I started to realize that this MSP, things were changing. And it wasn't that they weren't even changing and letting me know. I saw some things. I worked heavily with my colleagues that were overseas, and I saw some emails being forwarded back and forth. And I started reading between the lines is that they were getting rid of their AWS practice. Okay, which, I'm like, all right, I wonder if they're really going to do that. And so I actually started looking at that time, and I started talking to my PDM, and they were like, oh my God, you got to come on board. I'll recommend you. Let's start this, interview process. And I'm like, all right, that's really cool. And my colleague at the time, who is still a good friend, I was like, hey, you should start looking as well. Recommend and keep some things moving. Now, and I keep saying keep in mind, man, you gotta change. I need a new phrase here. Don't forget. Yeah, there's another one. Don't forget that the colleague of mine was actually just getting into AWS. Now, he utilized some of it. He worked really hard, got his AWS Pro certification, started learning it, started working with it. Bringing him on board was like a payback of a company that took a chance on me who didn't know much AWS, and I was giving it back to him. And I was like, okay, here you go. now learn it. You can learn on the job and do it. And he just took all this stuff and started working on it and trying to, run with it. Let's go forward to the very first Reinforce in June in Boston. My colleague and I were actually driving up to Boston. And the interesting part was my boss said, hey, I want to set up a call with you and him and, a little, I think, when was it? It was like a Thursday. Actually, I think it was a Tuesday because of the conference. But anyway, we're driving up to Boston. I put him on speaker. And the way he starts out this conversation, I put it on mute. And my colleague goes, he's going to let us go. I'm like, yep, I can feel that. Would you know it, that the nerve of the boss actually let us go while we were going up to Boston for Reinforce. We were in a company rented car. I would have stayed home. Well, actually, I probably wouldn't have because it was a cool conference and it was paid by them. But I was taken back. We got up there and I called the VP, basically his boss, who we were on good terms, good people. And talking to him, told him about that, and he's like, no, that's not the way it should have been handled. You know what? Take the next month and a half and figure out what you want to do. Yeah, if you could figure out a way that we could do AWS and go to market and services and come up with a good solution, I'm all ears. Well, yeah, they already left a bad taste in my mouth by just kind of letting us go while we're going up to Boston. But it turned out we're not let go. We just have like 2 months to find something. In terms, we're giving our notice 2 months in advance, or however it be. I was actually very comfortable because at that time, I was going to up to New York to actually have my loop on Friday. So what happened was we Reinforce. When I got back, I was going to do my loop that Friday up in New York, and go there. So I was not sweating it at all because I had all this confidence to interview at AWS and all the people that I worked with and, all the help that we were getting to do it. I was like, you know what? I was a little upset that's how it was handled. And I actually did not talk to my boss from there on out. I communicated straight with the VP on how they, kind of broke everything down. All right, I'm going to wrap this up because my next one's going to be talking about how to interview at AWS and how I did it and give you some tips and tricks. Mind you, this is my X number part series on why I left AWS. AWS is an awesome company to work for. That you get to do so many cool things and work with great people, highly intelligent people. And I'm going to tell you, and I almost said don't forget, anyway. I'm going to tell you in one of these series where I'm going to next, but I can't share it yet. I'm really super excited about this company. I've worked with them before. I've done a lot of cool things with them. And you're going to be like, oh, that's like perfect for you. My name is John Myer. This is the AWS Blogger. And in this series, I am going to be talking about and capturing why I left AWS. Stay tuned for the next one.